Okay, we are live. Welcome everybody to our lunch and learn of this week. We are studying the Torah portion of the week, which is Vayachel. I'm sharing the Zoom ID right now on the screen, so anybody who's watching on live stream, please join us in the Zoom meeting room as we are all enhanced by the discussions and contributions of each person who's in the class. Here's the meeting ID, here's the passcode. If you're on live stream, we'd love to have you join us. We're going to get started in like 2 minutes. So 2 minutes, we will get started. Hi, Mom.
Hi. I'm driving.
Okay, keep your eyes on the road. Keep your eyes on the road.
Have you started yet?
No, we're getting started in just a minute. We're live streaming.
Okay.
We're going to get started in just a minute.
I wrote down on Facebook that I'm changing my appointment, and I did for my patient. So I'm driving home. I will be home in a few minutes, and then I can
Perfect.
pay full attention. But I'm gonna drive. Okay.
Okay, drive. Yeah.
Do you want me to put myself on no video?
No, it's fine. It's fine.
Okay.
Okay, I'm gonna.
Sure.
Yes.
Sure.
Okay. And welcome to Judy. All right, so I'm going to stop sharing the screen, and anybody who's on live stream is welcome to join us throughout the class. And we're going to get started. Hello, everybody. Hi, Judy.
Hi, everyone.
Zee. Hi to my family who's here. It's so nice to have you three. Okay. So we're going to study the Torah portion of the week, Vayachel, and I'm going to begin with a video. There's a wonderful company called Bim Bam, and they've prepared videos, like short instructional videos for every Torah portion of the year. I don't know if you've seen them, but they're very sweet. So I'm going to share this. Let me make sure that I have audio here. Okay, here we go. Can everybody see the video?
Wise-hearted men, wise-hearted women, bring what you can, silver and linen, wool of crimson and of blue, and the bodies I gave you.
The summary of the Torah portion.
Build me a tent that I can dwell in, incense and oil and precious stones. And when you walk, I'll walk beside you, and where you live will be my home. Betzalel, guide them well, build me a place to dwell, make me a lamp with 7 branches from a single piece of gold, 7 arms like almond blossoms, from their petals fire will glow. Make me an altar of acacia, on the corners place 4 rings. Make me a pair of golden angels to guard my words beneath their wings. Oh, a place to live. Melt down your copper mirrors to make a sacred bowl and fill it up with holy water to wash your bodies and your souls. Weave me a cloth with angels' faces, just as fine as thread can sew. And when I see how they surround me, I will know that I am home. Wise-hearted men, wise-hearted women, bring what you can, silver and linen.
Wasn't that sweet? So that was a really beautiful musical interpretation of the Torah portion and a really nice summary. And this is by a singer. Her name is Alicia Jo Robbins. She's her musical group is Girls in Trouble, and she's the music that you've been hearing at our meeting, our matriarchs class. She's the composer of the pieces of music we've been hearing. So she happened to write one for the Torah portion that I'm happening to teach this week, which I thought was beautiful. So what symbols stood out to you from that video?
Cantor Rafi, are you taping today's session?
Yes, it's on live stream right now.
Well, it talks about the precious stones and the linens, and I never heard the reference to the melting of the copper mirrors. That was new to my ears. And the others, were familiar to me, but part of it seems, and I know it's contradictive, contrary to what we know, but it's almost like we're melting to make this golden calf, to make this beautiful sanctuary for me. And the part about the angels, I've always find interesting, because I know in a sanctuary, we have no images of faces. And so to me, that also brings up an interesting point, that I know in a sanctuary, you're never supposed to have an actual image of a face. So I don't know if these are faceless angels.
It's an interesting idea. Angels without faces. There's a lot that's been written on the cherubim, the angels, and it's not part of our discussion today, but we could definitely be part of a discussion for the future, because there's a lot that has been written about that. But you mentioned the precious stones, the fine linen. There's a real beauty and hard work that goes into the building of the tabernacle, this mobile sanctuary for God's presence. And we will talk about that. Any other symbols that stood out to you from the video? Any other images or symbols or a theme that stood out? What was
starting to talk, but he's muted.
Dad?
I think he's trying to fix it, maybe.
The candelabra. I saw the candelabra.
Very nice. Made of gold, the shining lights. Very nice.
Yeah, one piece of gold.
Yeah. Anything else? What was glowing inside each person? All the people that were bringing things to build the sanctuary. What was glowing?
Their love.
Their love. Their heart. Yes. That was emphasized throughout the whole video.
I was gonna say that, but I felt like the heart symbol with me on this Zoom is so like almost synonymous that I'd be like, of course you'd notice that, Rachel.
Well, Rachel, you put the heart symbol, and I was like, oh, that's a symbol she noticed.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay.
Well, almost every scene kept showing the heart of love.
Yes.
In all the people, because the sanctuary is nothing without the people.
Yes. Exactly. Okay. So these are all beautiful themes that you've picked up, and we're going to hone in on some of them. So just give me a thumbs up if you can see my screen with the source sheet. Okay. So here is the first verse I want us to look at. Our first section, can I get somebody to read this out loud? Judy, thank you.
Moses then convoked the whole Israelite community and said to them, "These are the things that Adonai has commanded you to do. On 6 days work may be done, but on the seventh day you shall have a Sabbath of complete rest. Holy to Adonai, whoever does any work on it shall be put to death. You shall kindle no fire throughout your settlements on the Sabbath day."
Okay.
Pretty strong words.
Pretty strong words. Put to death, right? You'll be killed. Whoever does any work on Shabbat. Okay, so here's the question. The commandment to observe Shabbat, which is said repeated multiple times throughout the Torah, it's immediately followed by further instructions for building the tabernacle. So it's almost like this random law, like, hey, by the way, on 6 days you can work, but on Shabbat you have to rest. Okay, now bring fine linens and bring this and bring that, and let's keep building the sanctuary and make donations. And so why would the Torah place the rule of Shabbat in this area right before continuing to discuss the work of building the tabernacle? Any ideas?
I've never known about the placement. So immediately as you're saying that, what jumped in my head was like, that is interesting. It makes me see this kind of like, hey, I love if you are enthusiastic to do this work as you should be and you want to, but you can't become a workaholic about it because you'll die. I don't even mean like the punishment. I mean, like if you actually keep working, right? Just like our bodies have to sleep, you have to rest, or you will just, throw yourself into a bad place. Similarly, right? Like if you're just trying to go, I mean, you won't survive. So I was like, wow, that's really interesting.
Yes. Beautiful, Rachel. So you're taking this metaphorically. It's not that you'll literally be stoned to death, but you will kill yourself working so hard and not giving yourself a break. Great. Any other thoughts about the placement?
But it doesn't say you shall die from hard work. It says you shall be put to death. Those are two very different statements.
Those are two very different statements. Yumat, yumat is the Hebrew for melacha.
Shall be killed.
You shall be killed, right?
Yeah.
Ziggy?
Yeah.
So you shall be killed. Now, Ziggy, you are a Hebrew expert. Could that be interpreted as you could kill yourself? I know it doesn't have the reflexive.
No, because it's by somebody else. It's not by yourself. You're not killing yourself.
Yeah.
Maybe I should clarify. Sorry. Go on, Ziggy.
The work could kill you, right?
Well, yeah. The other thing that I kind of took out of it was that even this very, very important task of building a tabernacle, even for that, you got to stop the seventh day. Mm-hmm. So I think that's probably why the placement here as opposed to somewhere else.
Yeah, I was like, I was going to clarify. I don't mean that that's how I was necessarily saying
it's okay.
I was simply trying to say, because the prompt was, why would it be placed in the midst? And what my point was trying to convey is that, yeah, I see it as such a love of Adonai to the people that like, rest is so important to me and a serious thing, like you better do it or you'll get killed, but as a punishment. But also the placement of it is really to emphasize this is how important it is. Like it's not an afterthought, like this, you have to rest. So I didn't really convey that very well, but that's what I meant when I was thinking through it.
Yeah, very nice. Okay. So yes, Dad.
I can actually do a follow-up in the sense that, yes, literally, it is talking about keeping the Shabbat sacred, and it's talking about the punishment for people who don't keep Shabbat, that they will be killed. But, we know that in this period, we're not doing that. But on the other hand, what Rachel said, that the fact that work will kill us, still keeps the value and still keeps the the punishment for the Shabbat, even though nobody comes and kills us with a sword. But the content and the meaning of that statement is still valid in the sense that if you don't keep Shabbat sacred and you work, then work will kill you.
Yes. Thank you. Well said, Dad. Very well said. Yes, Judy.
Well, I have a question about your question of placement.
Yes.
This instruction, I don't take it as, I didn't interpret it as a weekly Shabbat mandate, but this is how the tabernacle is built. And once the menorah is built and once the ark is built, it's there. I didn't interpret this as every Shabbat you will do all of these things. To me, this was a precursor, unless I'm misinterpreting.
What do you mean by that, Judy? I don't understand. What was a precursor?
The instructions are how to build my sanctuary, what to bring, what to put in it, the angels and build the ark, build the menorah. Now all these things have been created. The linens have been, there to build the decor of the sanctuary. It's a one-time process of now you've built a sanctuary. Now you shall dwell among these beautiful adornments, but it's not every week I'm going to build a menorah or melt the copper.
I see what you're saying. So you're saying the building is not ongoing. It's not weekly ongoing, but actually this Torah portion is continuing to talk about the building of the tabernacle. It's not complete yet. It's not.
So this is a weekly Shabbat. This is what you do on Shabbat or prior to Shabbat? How do you interpret it?
Well, that's the question. So let's look at some of the answers from our sages. So Rashi says, God intentionally mentioned to the people the prohibition in reference to Shabbat before the command about the building of the tabernacle. Okay, so there's a prohibition of Shabbat, and then there's commandment about building the tabernacle in order to suggest that the building of the tabernacle does not supersede Shabbat. So even something as important as building a tabernacle does not supersede Shabbat. So Judy, to answer your question, Shabbat is a weekly commandment, but the placement there, according to Rashi, is showing that, God is in the midst of giving instructions of how to build the tabernacle. It's been going on since, Truma, the building of the tabernacle, a few weeks ago in our Torah portions. And we're going to put this reminder in here about Shabbat and the importance of observing Shabbat, because even in the midst of the building of the tabernacle, you must observe Shabbat. I'm giving you these instructions. They're very important. You have to build the tabernacle very, very specifically, but all of this work that I'm commanding you to do does not supersede that you have to rest on the seventh day. Let's look at another sage. Sforno, who's an Italian rabbi and commentator and Renaissance, man, like many of the people of this era. You may not violate Shabbat even in order to complete the tabernacle sooner, although the work on the tabernacle is also a sacred task. So that really stuck out to me because I think about us trying to rush, get things done and be as efficient as possible. And working on Shabbat would certainly get the tabernacle to be built sooner. And maybe that's a priority. Let's get this done fast. But God and the Torah are saying, no, it's not important to get it done fast. It's not important. It's more important to rest on Shabbat. Okay.
So the message is nothing supersedes the sanctity of Shabbat, even completing my tabernacle.
Exactly. Yeah. Even completing what, Judy?
My tabernacle, I think.
The tabernacle. Even though I've commanded you to do all of these things, Shabbat still supersedes anything I've instructed you to do.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah, well, it supersedes certainly the building of the tabernacle. I think may we extend it to say it exceeds everything, any positive commandment of what to do? Not necessarily. We have, people.
Say that again? Yeah.
So, yeah, we have pikuach.
It's referencing anything related to working.
Yes. Exactly. It's referencing working, commandments to work. Matt, welcome. Okay, Rachel, yes.
Thank you.
It was a little bit related to what Judy had just said, and I think you were clarifying. I was trying to remember / know. Yom Kippur is that? This sounds weird as a question. Is that something that is the only thing that supersedes Shabbat, or it's at the same level, quote unquote, in sanctity? If that's off topic, totally can answer offline.
No, it's a beautiful question. And actually, Yom Kippur falls on Shabbat sometimes. And there's a question because you read a certain number of aliyot on Yom Kippur and a certain number of aliyot on Shabbat. On Shabbat, you read 7, okay? And on so on different holidays, you read a different number of aliyot. Rosh Hashanah, you read 5, Yom Kippur, you read 6, Shabbat, you read 7. On Shabbat, if Yom Kippur and Shabbat fall on the same date, you read the Shabbat number of aliyot, 7. You don't read the Yom Kippur number of aliyot. And there's a lot of other Torah aliyot, and there's a lot of other things that would indicate that, this is a separate discussion, but there's a lot of Shabbat in terms of liturgy and in terms of observance, in some ways supersedes Yom Kippur, in other ways Yom Kippur supersedes Shabbat. But I've been in discussions where, Shabbat does in many ways take precedence, but it is a weekly thing. It is something that's weekly, so that establishes its dominance and prominence. But I'd love to hear from other people in the group. Yes, Fawn.
Yeah, so I was just thinking about why the two thoughts are next to each other, and if you sort of flip it upside down, what I remember is if you need to think about what's allowed and what's not allowed on Shabbat, you're supposed to go back and look at things that had to do with building a sanctuary, or at least that's the way I remember learning it. That, because you can't hammer and you can't fold things and you can't light fires, which are things you would do when you build a sanctuary, that's how we know what we are not allowed to do on Shabbat. So rather than looking at it as the mention of Shabbat has to do with how important the sanctuary was, it's kind of upside down. It's like the building of the sanctuary is put next to the mention of Shabbat to explain to us in what ways we have to rest. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does.
Okay.
It does. Very nice. So let me say it back to you to make sure I'm understanding correctly. So the building of the tabernacle is what guided the prohibitions for Shabbat.
Correct. Or that's what I remember learning. Yes.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
And why do you think that would be? Why would the building of the tabernacle guide the prohibitions? What would be the intent?
That I don't know. What would be the intent? Maybe that's just a familiar activity. I don't know. I think by the time can you still hear me? Because I'm getting a phone call at the same time. Okay. All right. So by the time the rabbi started elaborating on what rules were necessary for Shabbat, they weren't building a sanctuary anymore, but maybe that was just a reference point for them.
Okay. Beautiful. So that is a very practical interpretation of why we might have these Shabbat prohibitions, why we have these Shabbat prohibitions. Thank you. Judy.
Okay.
Maybe it was to identify that the sanctity of the building of the tabernacle encompass various kinds of work. And so the hammering and the fire, starting a fire and tearing and things like that, carrying, which are prohibitions on Shabbat, that they were identified as activities that took place even for the sacred task of building a tabernacle. Even those things are disallowed on Shabbat because they are considered a manner of work that it took to build that tabernacle. We can, today that, Modern interpretation is we don't turn on lights on a switch, which is nothing to flip a switch. But when I was growing up, it was like the relative, you can't turn on a light switch. And it was like, because that in the days meant creating fire, or not just flipping a switch, but it was more complicated to make light.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. And let's read one more interpretation. I love, many of you know Rabbi Shafa Gold. I quote her often. She's written a book called Torah Journeys. And here is her interpretation. Can I get somebody to read this?
Sorry.
Go ahead, Rachel, right here.
Am I supposed to start?
Yes, when Moses calls.
Yep. When Moses calls the people together for their final instructions for building the Mishkan, we are first warned that there must be a holy rhythm to our lives. We are blessed with the knowledge that rest and reflection are absolutely necessary to the success of this project. Without the practice of Shabbat, we are warned, this work, even though it is holy work, will kill us. The blessing of Shabbat makes our work possible. Work becomes life-giving and wholesome only when it is balanced with Shabbat.
Thank you. So here is an interpretation that kind of encompasses a lot of what all of us were saying, which is Shabbat is related to the building of the tabernacle in the sense that the success of the project, the very success of the project, is dependent on the ability to rest and rejuvenate. Imagine people coming to the project with fresh eyes, well rested. They can probably do better designs. They might be able to work more efficiently once they come back well rested. And she also, Rabbi Gold, extends this to our work in general, the work of our lives. So even if we're doing the work that we find to be holy and sacred and so meaningful to ourselves, it could kill us. It has the potential to kill us. And, you know, yamut, the Hebrew of something killing us, I think could apply here if we read it creatively. The work will kill us. On the other hand, work is life-giving and wholesome when it's balanced with Shabbat. So work and itself without stopping is destructive and can kill us. But work, when it's balanced with rest, becomes life-giving and wholesome. So does anybody have any personal experiences with this? I certainly can relate. Work is life-giving when it's balanced with Shabbat. This adds a new dimension, I think, to Shabbat.
Yeah, I think she just says far more eloquently and poetically what I was trying to convey. See why you quote it.
Oh, you said it very eloquently, as did everybody. All right, let's move to our next, and anybody feel free to jump in if you have any reflections on that. But let's move to the next theme I want us to explore. So there's a lot in this Torah portion, several times, I think 4 times, that it's mentioned about the intention of the gift giving, bringing gifts to God for the building of the tabernacle. These are free will offerings, meaning that they are not, there's no obligation, it's not a commandment. And there are many different ways that the Torah describes the kind of intention you should have to bring these gifts that the Israelites were supposed to have. So everyone whose heart is so moved. Okay, so Nediv Libo, the person whose heart is moved, is willing. Okay, that's one. Here's the other one, the other reference, a few verses later. Everyone who excelled in ability and everyone whose spirit was moved came, bringing to God an offering for the work of the tent of meeting and for its service. And so this is Nisa'o libo, whose heart carries them to do this. V'chol asher nadva rucho, whose spirit is moved. So again, this is talking about the intention, the heart, the spirit, the interpretation here is who excels in ability, but the heart being carried to do something. We'll look at that in a minute, what that could mean. And here we go, men and women. So this extends, we've seen that the Torah sometimes does not include women in its, descriptions, but here specifically men and women are included. Ha'anashim al hanashim, the men with the women. all whose hearts move them. Again, kol nediv lev, all whose hearts move them. All who would make an elevation offering of gold came bringing all their gold items. And Judy, this is an interesting comment. Was it Judy? I think it was Judy, not Fawn. Judy, you talked about like the melting of the items for the golden calf. You know, here it's the same. It shows you how gold items could be used for the building of an idol, whereas gold items here could be made as a gift to God. It's kind of juxtaposed there. And here's another reference, yet another. Did you ever notice how many references in this Torah portion there are? Thus, the Israelites, everybody, all the men and women whose hearts move them, again, to bring anything for the work that God had commanded to be done, brought it as a free will offering. So this is free will. People bringing gifts because their heart moved them. Okay. So let's look at some of the interpretations and then we'll discuss. Here's a very practical interpretation from Sforno. He says, the donations must not be forced contributions. So this kind of made me laugh because I was thinking of like, you know, when we solicit donations, like when temples like ask for donations and, you know, this is like donations to the sanctuary, to donations to the synagogue. They must not be forced. Okay, they must not be forced. They must come freely. Guilt is a whole other question, but here, you know, Sforno and the Torah are saying it should really come from the heart. And we should talk about why. What difference does it make if a donation is made out of guilt or is made out of an obligatory feeling, or if it should really be, if you should be moved in your heart to give a donation or to give a gift. Okay, let's keep reading. So here is a commentator from Morocco in the 1700s. Every Israelite whose heart had elevated him brought these items. So there are two different categories of donors, according to Or HaChaim, two different categories. One is a person who donates as a result of an urge to do so in accordance with his means, both physically and financially. So this is somebody who has a lot to give, and they donate because, you know, hey, I have a lot to give and I'll give according to my means. And this person is, you know, what we looked at here, Nadav Libo. This is a person who is willing in their heart. The second type of donor is one who loses his sense of proportion because of his enthusiasm for the project for which he donates. So he contributes more than he can afford. The Torah describes a second type of person. Remember, we were talking about when their heart is carried away up here, Nisa'o Libo, which, you know, JPS translates as who excels in ability, but Or HaChaim translates this as he is carried away by his heart. This root in Hebrew means to carry. So this person is carried away and donates more than they can afford. At the time he donates, such a person considers himself as possessing far more economic resources than he actually does. The Torah spoke of both of these types of donors to show that there were both of these types of people among the Israelites. So according to this commentator, the overly enthusiastic donor is a person of distinction. But somebody who is moved to donate, you know, within their means is not a person of distinction. So again, this is just his interpretation. He's saying that somebody who donates outside of their means very enthusiastically that's a really distinguished donor because they get so carried away that they give more than they can even afford. We know that there are far inferior reasons for donating to charity or public causes, such as social pressures, etc. But the fact that the Torah speaks of only these two categories mentioned is a great compliment to the Israelites, because it says that all donors were sufficiently highly motivated to enable God's contribution to attach itself to their own, which is, we don't need to get into that last sentence for right now, but I want to focus on these two types of donors, the donor who gives within their means and the donor who gives beyond their means. And this commentator notes that both types are, you know, worthy of, it's a great compliment. And I would say both types are worthy, even they're not getting the honorific ish, which is the distinction given to the one who donates beyond their means. Even if they're not both getting that honorific distinction, that it's still noble. It's still a noble intention to donate either within your means or beyond your means, because you're giving a gift of your free will. Any thoughts about this comment and types of donations and intentions behind donations?
I had a question a little earlier up on this, and I know we chuckled about like, modern times donations, etc. But I guess I actually was curious, like, what was the pitch? I wasn't sure how the Israelites heard the giving part, and obviously I'm not expecting that any of us can say we know because we were literally there, but I guess I'm curious maybe what, if there's midrash on this, if people just have ideas they want to say as to how they've interpreted it.
Well, the plain reading is that God is telling Moses all these things, and then Moses is relaying it to the Israelites. That's the plain. Is that your yeah. That's your question? Like, how did they, the way that they're getting these instructions is through Moses.
Yeah, I guess I couldn't tell, or I was trying to imagine, was it something, again, how can we know? Like, did Moshe say, hey, was there like this enthusiasm about this is what we're going to be building so that it would cause this, or just kind of like, was it more somber of like, this, we can have the presence right about it, and again, who's going to really answer that? I get it, but I guess I'm curious.
Yeah. What was the ambiance of asking for?
Because I'm thinking of these descriptions, right? The enthusiastic heart, and I'm trying to think, well, what stirs that in a person other than how they hear about something. So.
Very interesting. Good question. I think, Mom, I saw you want to say something, and then Fawn.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Cantor Rafi, it seems that even when they are in bewilderment, there is a class. Some people have more and some people have less. And imagining that they were slaves, it seems that they were pretty rich slaves to be able to donate. But what really struck me was the difference of class. People who could afford, or they had the means. Do you have any guidance with this for us?
Wow, it's a really good point. This is we remember that the Israelites, they borrowed the belongings of the Egyptians before
borrowed.
Yes,
borrowed.
So they borrowed. So God disposed the Egyptians favorably toward the Israelites, and then the Israelites took all these gold and silver and livestock and everything and ran away with it. So I'm that's my interpretation as to how they have things. But your very good question, which is, why was there like a disparity? How did that happen? Wouldn't everybody have left on the same level? But I don't have like sources about that, but my first reaction is that I imagine that a civilization was forming, even though they were in the wilderness, some kind of trade system, barter system. And then there were naturally people who were more clever with business, people who made bargains and trades. And, the way that Jacob with Laban was able, after 7 years, to acquire all this livestock and acquire all these belongings. Like, I think that people just had differences of skill sets, and they were able to, they probably set up, there were all these tents set up in the wilderness, and people were trading items probably, and there were people who were smarter with their trading or more clever. So that's my guess, but I'm very curious if anybody has any other.
Cantor Rafi, if I'm not mistaken, I think they started or they got the instructions to build the tabernacle after 5 years being in Sinai. Was that 5 years?
That sounds right. I'm not sure if it's 5 years, but it was after several years. So yeah, after some time. Yeah. Of course. I can look that up. It definitely would allow, for a system of trade to be set up. Thank you for bringing that up. Fawn.
Yeah, so I have a few thoughts swirling around, and pardon me if I'm not articulate about them. So one of the things I'm wondering is where is the third type of person who donates less than they're able to? Like, were there no people like that? Like, everybody was doing what they're able to or more than they're able to, and there's nobody in the group that's not stepping up to the plate. It kind of reminds me of something that happened when I was a young adult. I was a member of the JCC board, the Jewish Community Center in the south suburbs of Chicago. And so I was, I had young children at the time. And this was at a time when we were looking at moving from a very small building into a much larger facility. So there was a large amount of donation from outside the community. And then I guess there was this expectation that it would be matched by funds coming from within the community. And so at one of the board meetings, somebody just got up and said, each member of the board is now obligated to contribute $5,000 to this new building fund. This was, after we were all board members, not like something we were told about before we joined the board.
Wow.
So there was a lot of uneasiness about that because, it was not a small chunk of change for a lot of us.
Yeah.
But one of the rabbis present there, kind of basically got up and made a speech that this is not a free will charitable offering. This is an obligation. It's more like tzedakah than giving out of your heart. And so most of us signed up for that obligation. But it was kind of a uncomfortable feeling.
Right.
And and I wasn't sure if that speech, it was made to sound like that's what Jews do. That's how we do it. And it was not at all like this Torah portion that's talking about free will offerings. So,
wow.
Yeah.
That's really interesting. Yeah, it seems like they could have been guided by this Torah portion. And I think to your point, like where is that third category or where, but according to this commentator, it wasn't. There were only these two categories among the Israelites. There were only people who were moved to donate within their means or beyond their means. But is that your question? Like, was there anybody who?
Well, there must have been some people. I mean, because even after this whole event happened that I participated in, I know there was somebody that I knew professionally who was actually in a somewhat better financial situation than I was, who still refused.
Mm-hmm.
So wow. There are people like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So are you asking, like, what about the people who just didn't give?
Yeah.
Among the Israelites?
Yeah. Like, why don't we hear about that?
Yeah.
There was actually written that it doesn't matter, even a half a shekel is okay. So there's no minimum requirement, and nobody was questioning their ability to give. So that's the beauty of this whole writing, that you just give whatever you can give, and it's between you and your maker, and nobody else's business.
So the barrier to entry is low, and every donation was worthwhile, as Ziggy pointed out. But I don't think the Torah speaks to, did everybody, let's see. Let's look. It says all the men and women whose hearts moved them to bring anything brought it. It doesn't say all the men and women brought something. It says all whose hearts moved them.
Okay. Who did? Okay.
Asher, who? That.
Yeah. I just feel like sometimes in Jewish communal life that this philosophy is not really seen, or it's just not the way things are handled.
You mean we're not perfect?
Say that again?
You mean we're not perfect?
Right. So, I mean, on a similar vein, I also, as a very young adult, before I even had kids, I was married, but I didn't have children yet. We looked at joining a synagogue for which we could not afford the expected minimum dues. And we had to meet with the, some guy who was in charge of dealing with poor people. And he said, well, what would you propose to donate in order to get your high holiday tickets? And we said $100, which at the time we were like in our early 20s. And his response was, is that the best you could do? Our response was to walk out. But I think sometimes this idea of what you can donate, that there are expectations that come from from congregations, from building funds, and it can be very uncomfortable and off-putting.
Yeah, it's a great point, Fawn. It's a great point. This could be like a source sheet. This could be a source of guidance for Jewish organizational fundraising,
Yeah.
removing the pressure. And Sforno says donations must not be forced contributions. Of course, let's think of a practical, if we take this to a practical interpretation, the tabernacle was God, a dwelling for the presence of God. And there was not like a budget or line items that needed to be, it was, something newly created. And there wasn't this risk of the tabernacle not being able to be funded, because there were very clear instructions that God gave, and presumably God knows what the people have. So if God's instructing them to use dolphin skins and lapis lazuli, people have it. So, in another context, I think Jewish organizations sometimes, especially these days, can really be struggling, and the donations are a matter of survival sometimes. So we, is the Torah teaching us that even in those situations, pressure is not, it's not valid, and it's not, and maybe we can read this to say that if there is pressure made on a donation, then maybe it does something to the community. Maybe it does, maybe it does take away from the building of a community. If there is that kind of, as you showed, Fawn, in the examples that you gave, you walked out of that meeting, rightfully. So that's a really good point. Rachel, I see your hand. We are almost done. So let me just get through the last thing, and then we'll take all.
I don't even need to say it if you're wanting to go on another point. Thanks.
Say a similar point. So we have two more interpretations of these comments to read. One is Rabbi Shefa Gold, and one is Brene Brown. Does anybody know Brene Brown? She's a researcher and lecturer, professor in the fields of vulnerability and leadership. She has a TED Talk that has millions of views. And then there's also Rabbi Rachel Barenblatt, who has a website, a blog called The Velveteen Rabbi. So these are three commentators. I want us to look at their thoughts for like 5 minutes, and then we'll close with your thoughts. So Vayachel blesses us with the awareness of the true nature of the heart that is unconstrained by fear. Even though the disaster of the golden calf is still a fresh memory, Moses can look out at us and see that our true nature is ruled by a generous heart. When he calls on the gifts and talents and generosity of the people, he does not do so only for what they come to offer to the communal project. He is calling the people to know their own gifts and to experience the blessing of a generous heart. So this is this kind of response to what we were saying. When we can experience the flowing and giving heart freed from the constraints of fear, we begin to know and trust ourselves as if for the first time. We can relax and let go of worries about not having or being enough, because the experience of flowing generosity feels effortless and infinite. So Shefa Gold would combine those two categories of people, the people that give within their means and the people that give beyond their means. When we experience a flowing and giving heart and we don't have fear, we begin to trust and know that it's not that we don't have enough. Vayachel tells us that Moses had to ask the people to stop giving because they'd become so intoxicated with their experience of generous flow. We are reminded that together we have more than enough to complete the task of making a place for God to dwell among us, between us, and within us. Let me find this here. Okay, so here, Moses says, here's the quote from the Torah. The people are bringing more, God says to Moses, the people are bringing more than is needed for the tasks entailed in the work that God has commanded to be done. Moses thereupon had this proclamation made throughout the camp: let no man or woman make further effort toward gifts for the sanctuary. So the people stopped bringing. Their efforts had been more than enough for all the tasks to be done. So she is talking, Rabbi Shefa Gold is talking about giving that is beyond your means. Like there were so many people who gave so eagerly, they became so intoxicated that they had it was more than enough to complete the task. And her interpretation is don't think about monetary or, goods, those kinds of tangible donations. Think about what we have within ourselves to complete the task of making a place for God to dwell within us and between us. So now let's take the sanctuary out of the physical realm. Let's think about the sanctuary in our everyday lives and how a sanctuary could be the relationship between me and you, between you and a loved one. It's a relationship between ourselves and God. That's the sanctuary. And this Torah portion is teaching us we have more than enough at all times to build that place. We always have more than enough to build that place, to the point that God's telling Moses, the people are bringing too much, stop. It's always within us. So I wanted to extend this to Brene Brown, who has a concept called wholehearted living. And she teaches that wholehearted living is about engaging in our lives from a place of worthiness. It means cultivating the courage, compassion, and connection to wake up in the morning and think, no matter what gets done and how much is left undone, I am enough. It's going to bed at night thinking, yes, I'm imperfect and vulnerable and sometimes afraid, but that doesn't change the truth that I'm also brave and worthy of love and belonging. And this ties back directly to the first point we were discussing about Shabbat. We are enough. We do not need to work 7 days a week to be complete, to be whole, to complete any holy task. We are enough with 6 days, and we deserve the rest of the 7th day. We deserve Shabbat. We are complete. The world is complete with Shabbat. So, obviously I'm extending Brene Brown. She was not talking about Shabbat, but this is how I read it. And I thought it so clearly connects all of the themes of this Torah portion that we've been talking about. And she's talking about wholehearted living. And I think it's interesting that this Torah portion talks so much about our hearts and being, this sense of being moved freely to do things. And finally, last comment from Rabbi Rachel Barenblatt. The community has become so swept up in the experience of being generous, of donating both items of value and the gift of heart and spirit that accompanies those items, that their generosity overwhelms the artisans. They give too much. Moses has to remind them to stop. A boundary, some gevurah, is needed to balance the community's overflowing loving kindness, chesed, and willingness to give. So the boundary. In my mind, the boundary is Shabbat. How can this speak to us today, so many centuries removed from the construction of the Mishkan? Maybe in this way, it can exhort us to give freely of ourselves, our gifts, and our talents in the communal work of creating a sacred space where the presence of God can dwell, and can also remind us that once we've built that space for God, it's our job to pull back and to turn our generosity in other directions, to make God's presence manifest through building homes for the needy, weaving garments for those who are cold, and adorning our world with all the beauty we're capable of creating. What do we think?
And so Tikkun Olam was born.
That's right. That's right. So the overflowing generosity, should not be just directed towards one thing, this building, that's kind of like working with blinders on and building this tabernacle for God's presence. It should be turned to, take that flow of energy and God's presence and put it in your work throughout the world.
And to Rafi?
Yes.
I always thought the uncomfortable way of thinking that how come God needed a tabernacle in the middle of the desert? Why did she needed a place of dwelling? And I hope after your today's class, my answer will be that probably God thought people were feeling guilty making a golden calf. So by making a tabernacle and asking them to give from their heart the same thing that they gave for the golden calf, which was gold, maybe this way was a way to make people feel themselves being purified again. Could it be?
Absolutely. Beautiful interpretation. Yeah. So it's not that God needed the tabernacle, but people needed the tabernacle.
That makes me feel much more comfortable.
It's a great interpretation. Thank you. Anything else?
Well, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I love the concept, this last reading by Rabbi Birnbach, that we can build a sanctuary. We can make it beautiful, but there is more to it. It doesn't need to be so overly ornate that we forget about the people who are homeless, the people who need shelter and clothing, that give but go beyond the scope of just a beautiful sanctuary. Because when we've traveled through the world and gone to churches that are so ornate, and so much poverty around them, that you go to Europe and you see these altars that are just, laden with gold, and yet it could be in the poorest type of community, that God is saying to us, make a beautiful sanctuary, but don't forget what goes on outside the sanctuary. I think it's a beautiful message.
It is. And you said it very eloquently. Thank you. Rachel, you want to share your last thought that you typed? Oh, I think Rachel's frozen.
Oh, okay, sure. Yeah.
Oh.
Oh, am I frozen? Sad.
Your images, but
Am I back yet?
we have about 30 seconds. So 30 seconds.
All I said on there was about how I was thinking of, if we're really devoted to what we're giving to, then perhaps that could stir in the parts what to give and the fact of giving. So it just made me think of that combination of what Ziggy shared about the half shekel and the unfortunate situations that Fawn had shared that she experienced in the past. So hopefully, I think shuls are improving in that direction.
Yes, agreed. Well, thank you all so much for studying with me. It was really, really lovely to see you all and to have this group together. Loved hearing from you, and I hope that you embrace this Shabbat and take it as a time to rest and think about all of the holy work that you're all doing in your lives, whatever that looks like. You deserve to have a rest and to approach it wholeheartedly and rejuvenated. And I hope that you're also moved. I hope that I hope we all experience giving and generosity in a way that's really from our hearts and not from a place of pressure or obligation also.
Amen. Shabbat shalom.
Wonderful.
Have a good week, everyone.
Everybody, nice to see you all.